High in the frozen Himalayas, where the air is thin and silence feels heavier than gunfire, two ancient civilizations came face to face in 1962. They met not in diplomacy halls, but on icy mountain ridges. What followed was a war that lasted barely a month, yet it reshaped Asian history forever. This is not just a story of bullets and borders, but of miscalculations, mistrust, and missed warnings. Welcome to ECO's History Pro, where we don't rush history, we let it speak. After India gained independence in 1947 and China emerged as a communist power in 1949, a sense of optimism filled the air. Hopes of Asian unity were symbolized by the famous slogan, Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai, which means Indians and Chinese are brothers. But beneath the smiles and handshakes lay an unresolved problem, a relic inherited from colonial times, a border that was never mutually agreed upon. This border stretched across the harsh, unforgiving terrains of Aksai Chin in the west and the Northeast Frontier Agency, or NEFA, in the east, which is now known as Arunachal Pradesh. These were not just lines on a map, they were points of contention waiting to ignite. For China, the Aksai Chin Plateau was strategically vital. It was the crucial land bridge connecting its two restive regions, Tibet and Xinjiang. So vital, in fact, that China quietly built a military road through it during the 1950s. A move that went largely unnoticed by India at first. When India did discover the road, it was seen as a major violation of its sovereignty. India considered this barren, high-altitude desert as its own territory, a part of Ladakh. The initial seeds of mistrust were sown. Tensions escalated dramatically after 1959. That year, a major uprising in Tibet was suppressed by Chinese forces, forcing the spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, to flee. India granted him asylum. A humanitarian gesture that China interpreted as a hostile act, believing India was meddling in its internal affairs. The brotherly relationship publicly championed by both nations began to crumble, the warmth of diplomacy was replaced by the chill of suspicion, official communications became strained. Filled with accusations and counter-accusations, the border, once a symbol of shared geography, was now becoming a line of confrontation. As political dialogue failed to yield any results, India decided to take a more assertive stance. It adopted what became known as the forward policy. The idea was to establish small military posts in the disputed regions, often behind Chinese positions, to physically assert India's territorial claims and prevent further Chinese encroachment. From New Delhi's perspective, this was a way to show resolve and force a diplomatic solution. But from Beijing's viewpoint, these small, isolated outposts were a direct provocation, a nibbling away at territory China considered its own. The stage was set for a military clash. Each side was misreading the other's intentions, trapped in a spiral of escalating actions and reactions. Then, on October 20, 1962, the situation exploded. Without any formal declaration of war, Chinese forces launched a sudden, massive, and coordinated attack across the Himalayas. The offensive was two-pronged, striking simultaneously in the western sector of Aksai Chin and the eastern sector of NEFA. The scale and ferocity of the assault caught the Indian leadership completely by surprise. The dream of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai was shattered by the sound of gunfire echoing through the mountain passes. The Indian soldiers on the front lines fought with immense courage, often to the last man and the last bullet. But bravery alone was not enough. They were tragically unprepared for what they faced. Stationed at extreme altitudes, many lacked even the basic necessities for high-altitude warfare, like proper winter clothing, insulated boots, and modern weaponry. Their World War II-era rifles were no match for the automatic weapons of the Chinese army. Supply lines were precarious, winding through treacherous mountain roads that were often blocked by snow. Logistically, the Indian army was at a severe disadvantage. In contrast, the Chinese army, the People's Liberation Army, was a battle-hardened force. They were better equipped, better trained for mountain warfare, and logistically far better prepared. Their strategy was meticulously planned and ruthlessly executed. They used their superior numbers and firepower to overwhelm the isolated Indian posts one by one. In the eastern sector, Chinese troops advanced rapidly, pushing deep into Indian territory, capturing key towns like Tawang. In the west, they consolidated their control over the entire Aksai Chin Plateau. Within weeks, the Indian defenses had crumbled under the combined pressure of difficult terrain, brutal weather, and a superior military strategy. The country was in a state of shock, its confidence shaken. The government in New Delhi was grappling with a military catastrophe that few had thought possible. And then, just as abruptly as it began, the war ended. On November 21, 1962, exactly 1 month after the first shots were fired, China declared a unilateral ceasefire. It announced that its forces would withdraw from the territories they had captured in the eastern sector, pulling back to the line of actual control. However, in the west, they held onto Aksai Chin, solidifying their control over the strategic region that had been a primary cause of the conflict. This sudden end to the fighting left India humiliated, wounded, and forced into a period of deep, painful self-reflection. The war was over, but its consequences were just beginning to unfold. The defeat was a national trauma for India. It shattered the nation's post-independence idealism and forced a complete overhaul of its defense policy. The government realized that pacifist rhetoric was no substitute for military preparedness. This led to a significant increase in defense spending, the modernization of the armed forces, and a permanent shift in strategic thinking. India moved away from its policy of non-alignment and sought closer military ties with other powers. The army was expanded, re-equipped, and retrained, with a new focus on high-altitude warfare. The 1962 war, in essence, forged the modern Indian military. For the relationship between the two Asian giants, the war planted deep seeds of mistrust that continue to poison relations to this day. The border remains a live and contentious issue. The line of actual control is not a clearly demarcated international boundary, but a fragile, contested ceasefire line. The ghosts of 1962 are ever present, visible in later confrontations like the Doklam standoff in 2017 and the deadly clashes in the Galwan Valley in 2020. Every border incident is viewed through the prism of the 1962 conflict, with both sides wary of the other's intentions. The 1962 war serves as a powerful lesson in international relations. It proved that unresolved borders are not just lines on old maps, they are ticking clocks, waiting for the right combination of political tension, nationalism, and miscalculation to explode. Its echoes continue to ripple through modern geopolitics, shaping the strategic calculus of not just India and China, but the entire Indo-Pacific region. Understanding this short, brutal war is key to understanding one of the most complex and consequential rivalries of the 21st century. In our next video on Ecos History Pro, we will explore how this war influenced future India-China standoffs in greater detail.
We'll analyze why the border issue remains one of Asia's
most dangerous fault lines and what the future might hold for these two powerful neighbors. If you value calm, deep, and honest history, subscribe to the channel. Because history doesn't shout, it waits to be understood. Thanks for watching.